Hello, I'm Dr. Nidhi Gupta, pediatric endocrinologist and digital wellness coach in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to Inspinar. Ivana Ciric is the Director of Product Practice at Thoughtworks. Her skill in developing forward-thinking software products has resulted in delightful products for millions of users and increases in revenue for her clients. Ivana, welcome to Inspinar.
Thank you so much for having me.
As a digital product developer, what factors do you think through before deciding whether Thoughtworks would develop a product or maybe they won't?
That's a great question. So I think we should start with who actually makes that decision, because often it's not the sole product manager. It might be a group decision, or it might be vetted through multiple layers. So typically, if you're working with a large company, that decision will go through all the way up sometimes to the executives or even the CEO, depending on how big it is. But if you're at a startup, then there are fewer layers and perhaps the co-founders will decide. The product development team itself may contribute to gathering evidence about why or why not we should build it. And sometimes they will make recommendations. But typically, as a product development team, you'll know what you're developing, and then you really dig into the how. So what is it going to look like? What are we going to consider? And what are the features? How is the user going to interact with this product? There are a couple of formal approaches that you might take. You might be familiar with human-centered design or design thinking. And at Thoughtworks, we embrace product thinking. So what does that mean? When you're, again, about to develop a product, you want to evaluate it along 5 key areas. The first one is desirability. So does the user want to use this product for some reason? For any reason. Viability, which is this good for the business? Because we have to balance both. Feasibility, can we actually build it? Usability, is it going to be easy to use? So maybe the customers really want to use it, but we've designed it in a way that's not ideal for them to access. And then we also look at ethics. Is this something that is actually good for people, for society? Is it going to get us into legal trouble for any reason? So all of those factors are considered when we decide whether or not to build a product. Ultimately, there is a business side to this. There's some kind of value exchange. So we build a product and we put it out into the market, and hopefully it's valuable to users in some way. Any app that we build. And in return, the market will give us value back. We'll make money, perhaps, or get exposure or some other benefit. So there's always an exchange, and we have to make sure that that exchange is fulfilled. I'll give you an example of apps that have started on both ends of the spectrum. So we might have an app like Slack. Slack didn't start out by thinking, how are we going to make money? It was actually an internal tool. And they built it for a different company that just wanted to communicate internally. But because they realized that there was so much value that that app had created for its internal users, they launched it out into the market and then started the other side of that equation. But you might look at other apps such as Duolingo. They have a market, they have their language learning platform, and now they're thinking about how do we expand our business so that we grow revenue, but also build something that is useful for our customers. So they're doing both at the same time.
The desirability, viability, usability, feasibility, and ethics are all of the areas of focus in app development at different times. Now, how do you gauge the interest of the consumer in an app that you are going to develop? And is that a process that happens before a product development starts, during, or after?
Well, I think of the entire process as product development. So even though I might not be building a product, I might not be coding the app directly, I'm building other artifacts. Even something as simple as a survey starts by understanding the problem that our users in the market may have. So before I even touch any kind of code or no code, maybe I'm writing things down on a piece of paper and showing them to a customer. To me, that's still part of the product development process. So in this case, we are talking about desirability. If you don't have desirability, there isn't much of a point in looking at some of the other pieces. We don't care if we can build it if nobody wants it in the first place. So there are various techniques that we can go through. And while we go through them, we also go through varying levels of fidelity of that product that we're building. So again, you might start with a paper prototype. You might just start with a survey, some questions. You might interview your customers and look at a specific situation. Maybe you're just in healthcare and you want to know, how do they engage with the healthcare system? What are some of the challenges? Because that's where you'll actually find the insights to build your product. And then we go all the way up to actually building an app and testing it with users. But in between, you might build something called the Wizard of Oz. You might do something called a Wizard of Oz test. And if you can imagine, because you remember the movie, you'll be presenting a product to the user as if it's a finished product, but you're actually doing the calculations or the work behind the scenes, and then you're seeing how they interact with it. So all of these are cheaper, faster ways to make sure that before we start the heavy investment in building this properly, making sure it's tested, making sure it's accessible, that there's enough interest to justify that investment.
I'm sure there are many metrics that are used in the background to analyze the interest of the user. And one metric, which I think, and I might be wrong, is the clicks. I'm always very mindful of the links that I'm clicking on internet, always thinking, where is my information going? So tell us, Ivana, what kind of data is collected from a user's online interaction, the links that they're clicking on? What does it tell you about them?
Well, let's maybe step back a few steps and talk about what kind of data we would need for the different types of products that we build. Not all products are the same. And if we go back to that business value versus user value exchange, we have to look at the type of product. So you have one category of product that is all about attention. The more we spend, the more time we spend, the more clicks, the more views, the more revenue that translates into for the app. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Then there are transactional products or apps. So for example, retail. We don't necessarily want somebody to be on Amazon's app 24/7, but we do want them to make a lot of transactions as the company. That's how we make money.
Right.
And then we might have productivity apps. So Google Suite and Office 365 or Microsoft Office. There, you're looking at, perhaps you're selling to a business and you want to look at how many licenses. So this tool has to be useful for the user. Depending on which one we're talking about, the metrics that we measure are quite different, naturally. But if we're specifically talking about the attention apps, because I know that's where a lot of digital well-being work happens, let's think about what some of the business models are. It might be ad supported. So again, more clicks on the ads translates into more revenue, because advertisers will then see that they themselves are making money, so the other side of that market. You may have subscription models where you'll only be charging a certain part of your user base. Maybe you have a free plan, maybe you don't. So one common pattern that we use with metrics, they're called pirate metrics because they spell out R. So you'll go with, yeah, and it is quite commonly used in the industry. And when you talk about clicks, depending on where you're clicking and how you're going through the flow of that app or that website, you'll be on different parts of those metrics. So I'll list them off, right? You have acquisition. So are they even finding your product? Are they downloading your app? Are they finding your website somehow? So that's all about awareness. How are they discovering? You have activation. They have to take some action that will hopefully lead them to that value or that like moment where they realize why they would want to use the product. Maybe they're creating an account, for example. Maybe they're, I don't know, uploading a picture and posting it on Instagram, and that's their first picture. And then they see, wow, this is an app I really want to use. Or maybe they're just browsing through other pictures. And then after a while, you'll want to measure retention. So are they just going on the app once, logging in, and then dropping off? It's really important, again, if you depend on people being active and engaging with the app to measure retention. And as you can probably notice, this is kind of like a funnel. So you'll have the most people discover your app or website, but as time goes by, fewer of them will activate and fewer of them will be retained. Then we have referral. Are they telling their friends about it? Is it that good that they want to tell other people? And of course, revenue. So as we track those clicks, there are great tools that will actually show you how that journey progresses and where people are. But that's not the full picture. You then have to talk to your users, again, going back to product discovery. Maybe you'll have a user interview and you'll talk to some of the people who have stopped at a certain point. Maybe they've activated and they used the app for a little bit and then they dropped off. And so a lot of product development goes through these cycles where we might build something and then we'll test it out. So we'll put it out into the world. Again, it may not be a fully complete app. It may just be a prototype. And then based on the data, we'll find out how much based on these different metrics, and based on customer conversations, we'll find out why these drop-offs are happening or why these actions are happening in a certain way.
So a lot of this data is then driven by human psychology. This is fascinating, Ivana. As product developer, do you and your team feel the need to familiarize yourself with the concepts of psychology and how the human brain works?
100%. And it's actually, it's table stakes in product development. So of course, Nir Eyal's hooked model is a very well-known model in product circles, but in general, product psychology is an important concept that all product managers should be aware of, and are. So again, if we go back to the example of Duolingo, they were quite successful in using psychology. If you think of, I don't know if you're a user of Duolingo.
I've heard a lot about it. Learn to speak Spanish in 3 days. That's what I know about Duolingo.
So what they're really good at is combining what we've learned about gaming, video games, gamification. It's a common word that product developers use, and using it to help people achieve their goals. And in this case, it's to learn a language. So they've implemented things like streaks. They've made it feel like a game, and it's fun. So you get to learn, you're on the app, but you're also having fun while you're doing it, right? So they've been really successful at employing some of these principles of psychology. The one caution, of course, is getting into dark patterns. So we don't want to use things like, I don't know, the default effect to make sure that we set up our app in a way that benefits us, but not our customers. There's social proof, there's reciprocity, there's variable reward with all of these notifications and scrolling. So tons of biases that come into play. And it's certainly well known in the industry how to design your product so that they will impact user behavior in a certain way.
And that is what I talk about in terms of a consumer's digital wellness. So at Thoughtworks, what elements, Ivana, are built into the apps, into the products that foster the user's digital wellness?
So we work with a lot of different companies. We work with software and hardware products as well. So with hardware, you get into a more interesting space because it's in your physical space, right? So some of the common elements I can think of is when we talk about well-being, we don't just mean physical well-being or mental, emotional well-being, but there are also aspects of privacy. There's also this idea of social well-being. How do we connect with others? And more important, the sense of having agency or choice. When you go on to social media, you often don't feel like you really have any choice because all of a sudden 20 minutes have disappeared. So when I think of some of the elements that have been built in, I think of control over notifications, control over data sharing. So making sure that that is in the hands of the customer and not in the hands of the company. It may be true that data isn't just about a company making more money. It's also about customizing the product to be better for the customer. So you do want to make some trade-offs and help the customer understand, if you give me this data, here's what I can do for you. It's not just all about the company taking. With physical devices, so a very simple example, we may have privacy covers. That to me is really important as a consumer. I love apps that remind you to take a break. Hey, you've been on here, you've been scrolling for a while. Do you want to take a break? It might be a good idea. And then, of course, we have the whole category of digital wellness built into the operating system where I think in Android, it's just called digital wellbeing. And you can go in, you can set limits for apps, you can turn grayscale mode on, do not disturb focus mode. So there are lots of features that are built in. And then you have apps that are built for digital well-being to start with. So any meditation apps, DuckDuckGo is a great example of the privacy-focused app that's also useful for you in some other way. I do also want to mention that quite a few companies now have implemented a set of specific privacy and ethics reviews as part of the product development process. So although it's general and high level, it may not be at the level of a feature, but companies do care what data is collected and how do we make sure that that is legal, right? And that it's allowed and that it's good for the customer and that we're transparent about it. So there are quite a few steps that are being taken to ensure digital well-being across different aspects.
So we talked about some of the apps or some of the features on our devices that a user might turn on to foster their digital wellness. What about fitness in general? I know Thoughtworks has worked with many companies in the fitness sphere. There is a plethora of fitness apps out there. Which one is your favorite, Ivana?
I don't know if you'll be surprised or not, but I don't actually use fitness apps.
You just make them.
Yeah. So in general, product developers are quite opinionated about digital products, and just because of my background, I've been very involved in various aspects of fitness outside of or before fitness apps really became big. So my preference is always to be in a community, to get outside and be in nature. So a lot of those don't lend themselves well to the fitness app where you have to be very, very much interacting with the app itself. That said, There are so many options out there, right? You have wearables. So I did get myself a little watch. I use it to tell the time and to track my steps. That's it. There are no notifications on it. I've turned them off. They can appear. So I do use a watch. It helps me to get a sense of how active I've been and act as a little reminder. But as far as apps on my phone or my TV and so on, I don't really use them. But I do think it's great that the options are there. It means that whatever you're looking for is chances are somebody has created it. And because there's a lot of competition, they have to continue to increase the value that they are providing you as a user. So maybe you are a long distance runner and you want very accurate tracking of your heart rate and your distance and the map and the elevation. So all of these parameters. I know cyclists who buy special computers and they connect them to apps, again, because they're really focused on performance. But you might be the average person who's finding it really hard to get motivated, and maybe having a game on top of exercise where you're riding a bike and you're going through all these games and collecting points is a great way to get people fit. Some apps have communities where you can see leaderboards, you can connect with others. And again, I know companies that are really focused on having that community feel. You might have personalization, which is, again, really important. I have a fitness journey and I want to track how that's going so that I can be more fit. And I'll just give you one example of one of the internal apps we built, which gets me moving every single time. And that is every September, we have a contest internally. So it's just an internal app built on top of Slack where you can track daily the steps you've taken. We call it September, and we are split up into groups. So we're competing against other groups and also against others because there's an ultimate winner who stepped the most. So, and I can say I've learned tennis is fantastic. Training for a marathon, also fantastic. But it just means that every day I'm thinking, how can I get those steps? And it's not in a way that makes me feel like it's a chore. It's a fun thing that connects me to others. So those are some of the things that I look for when I'm trying to develop an app. This applies more than just fitness, whatever it is. Maybe, again, language learning, you want to be part of a community. There are some apps that might focus on that. There are some apps who might focus on performance, and those people who are so focused and motivated that all they need is just that, that app, that platform to be on.
So one app does not fit all. It's a matter of finding the app that enriches you and does not engulf you, that adds to your life and does not take it away from you. I'm often asked this question by my patients, Ivana, and I don't have an answer to this yet. Maybe you do. Is there an app that patients can use to simply click the photo of the food that they are eating and the app will tell them the nutritional content?
Oh, yes. So again, we've come a long way from apps where you have to type in all the nutritional content and then they kind of, you reverse that, right? You're the one doing all the work. But with generative AI, this is a fantastic use case for it because you can go in, I've tried it on a couple of different Gen AI tools. You can actually upload a photo, say, what is this? And what is the nutritional content? And boom, you have it there. And if you want to create a meal out of it, or you say the reverse, you say, I want to go shopping and I want to create a meal and I want it to have this much protein and this much fat and this much carbs. You can tell a Gen AI tool and it will spit out recipes for you. You can use it to do meal planning. I personally don't, but I know people who have.
Just like apps, it sounds like there are two sides to AI, using AI responsibly and using it unresponsibly. So in your work as a product developer, Ivana, what are some concerns that might come up about using AI unresponsibly?
So this isn't not a new concept. We've always had concerns about tech in general, and then machine learning being used in a variety of different applications, from job searching, employment in general, credit history, teaching, the education system, the prison system. So there are already quite a few places where people have been experimenting with different types of AI to enhance or maybe accelerate human performance. So all of the things that are super important there apply even more in the case of generative AI. So if you're looking at environmental impact, for example, behind the scenes, there are servers, there are all of these computers, there are all of these machines that need electricity to run. Where are we getting that electricity? How much waste are we generating? So the environmental impacts will only continue to accelerate. We have societal impacts, especially when it comes to vulnerable populations. And again, that example of the prison system comes to mind. But in general, how are people being evaluated using AI? And do we have humans that can check and make sure to correct anything that goes wrong and provide feedback to those systems? What else? So again, we don't want to perpetuate any biases that exist. Those are the big ones, but again, there is, of course, the digital well-being. We're able to generate even more content than we have in the past. And we were already pretty good at that. But now misinformation is at a whole new level. We can create videos with literally just a click, and the barrier of entry is really low. You no longer have to know how to program. You no longer have to have a lot of skill. Kids can go on, say a few things, and create a video of anything they want, right? And once that's out there in the world, you don't know where it came from.
It can get a little scary and a little overwhelming at times too, Ivan. I mean, you guys are at the forefront of the development of products. How do you take care of your own digital wellness? And do you feel you have the right to disconnect and not be plugged into the information overload that is surrounding you at all times?
We do. And what I think is really great is mental health has been a focus more recently. It's really talked about quite a bit in the tech world because of what has happened. There are a lot of people who are very vocal about some of, even if we're talking AI harms, but in general tech harms, that there are organizations that are starting to take shape. As I mentioned, there are review boards within companies. So there are ethical, not just ethical AI, but ethical tech groups that will review any products being developed. But in terms of taking care of ourselves, again, there's more and more focus on companies making sure that we balance how often we are online. So absolutely, we are encouraged not just to disconnect, but we actually have programs in place where we can connect offline, if you will, so in person with our colleagues. We have a number of specific employee resource groups that get together. They go out and do something fun. I organize a monthly meetup where we go and we go out for walks. We just go to a restaurant and chat, right? So making sure that companies are looking at the social and the human side is super important. And I always tell people that if you're engaged in other activities for your own benefit, for your own curiosity, again, maybe I'm learning a language, maybe I'm learning a sport, you actually come back to work and you're a better product builder. So it does feed into, and you're more empathetic to other humans that you're building for. So there's actually, these things benefit the business as a whole. One thing that I do think about is there are some folks, some groups of people, again, on that same theme of AI, that are less advantaged when it comes to developing tech. So my mind goes to the folks who are involved in some of the manual processes to train models, some of the people who are in content moderation, which is often quite a stressful role, folks who are working on the gig economy apps and how those apps influence their well-being. So I do want to see more of a focus on companies being held accountable for the impact that they have on society, on individual health, and on the environment. We do take on some mission-driven work at Thoughtworks, which is super rewarding for us. We collaborated with the UN on a responsible tech playbook. So there's so much work and so many talented people in tech who do want to improve things.
Making human connections, organizing monthly meetings for people to get together and chat outside of work, learning a new language, playing a sport makes you a better product developer and makes you more empathetic for the user for whom you are developing the product. Fascinating. Thank you so much, Ivana. Thank you for being on Inspinar. It was fascinating to hear everything that you had to share. Thank you for sharing your immense knowledge and expertise with us.
I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm always happy to talk more. There's so much more to product development. So if anyone is interested, they can always just reach out and we can go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ivana. And I will close our episode with a reminder to reconnect with the real world, reconnect with health, joy, and efficiency. Let's reclaim our time and attention. Let's ungrip devices and grip life. I will see you next time.